Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So describe your philosophy of effective coaching.
Well, I think for coaching to be effective, it has to be about supporting teachers to be more self-directed. I think it has to be about supporting teachers to help them to learn and grow and be the best that they can be. There are a lot of coaching models out there that are what I would call deficit models, where the job is to go in and fix the teacher. And I don't think teachers need to be fixed. I think teachers are just fine. So I think it's really important that a coaching program supports teachers to become more self-directed.
Well, with that goal in mind, I guess, what are some key non-negotiable components to any effective coaching model?
Well, I think number one, trust is a must. I think there has to be trust there. If there's not, there's just not going to be a good coaching relationship. So trust is really, really critical. And sometimes that takes time to develop that, but it's critical. A second thing I think is critical is coaches need to recognize the expertise the teachers have that they're working with. Because they do have expertise, and they need to recognize that and embrace that.
Any other ones you can think of?
I think it's important for coaches to realize that all teachers can learn and grow. You know, in education we talk a lot about all students can learn, but somehow when we start working with adults, we kind of lose track of that. And I think sometimes we think all teachers can't learn and grow. And I think coaches have to take hold of that and believe that all teachers can learn and grow. I think that's important.
You've said a lot of do's, and I like that, but my question would be, are there any particular don'ts that you might caution against?
The biggest don't for me is having that deficit model, where coaches go in and think their job, that there's something wrong with this teacher, and that's why I'm here, because there's something wrong and I need to fix this person.
Okay. Or
Or thinking, this teacher is never going to change. This teacher doesn't want to change. I think some of those attitudes we have to remove and have positive presuppositions about the teachers that we're working with, that they do want to learn and grow and change.
So what aspects of systemic change do you believe can be supported effectively by coaches?
Well, change can be really difficult for teachers. They have a lot of external factors on them in terms of change. And I think if teachers don't feel supported and valued, they're less likely to want to be involved in that. And so I think coaches can support teachers in feeling valued and bringing their voice to the table. And I think that in that way they can help teachers be involved in that change process.
When you talk about the change process, what might that look like? What strategies have you seen that might help in influencing that change process?
I think one thing that coaches can do is, many times coaches work with individual teachers, and that piece is really important. But in order to really affect change, I think you also have to work with groups of teachers, like PLCs. So working with individual teachers is important, but in order for systemic change, I believe it's got to be that collaborative piece. The word systemic means universal, everybody. Systemic change really is all about collaboration. And so I think that coaches can not only work with individual teachers to work on their individual or personal practice, but bringing in and working with those PLCs or groups will really help support that collaborative change. The collaboration that's needed for change. Sometimes also coaches have to actually support teachers in understanding what collaboration looks like. Just because you meet in a PLC every week doesn't mean you know how to collaborate. And so there's some resources out there. One that I think is really good is the work of Adaptive Schools by Garmston and Wellman. And that work really teaches groups how to work together and how to collaborate. So sometimes that's important, actually working with teachers and teaching them what it really means to collaborate.
Well, and one of the other things that we think about when we think about systemic change is this idea of the role of leadership. And how do you see the coach fitting in both a leadership role, but also in interfacing with the leadership of a school district as well, because that can oftentimes influence the effectiveness of change?
Yeah, so many times coaches are put in these dual roles where they've got to do things at the school level and work with teachers, but then they also have this other role where they're communicating with like district level. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And so coaches need to have those people skills that are necessary to interact in both of those communities, because both of them are critical. Many times working with people at the district level who don't know anything about mathematics or know very little about mathematics and what might be needed, the coach is critical in that aspect as well, especially if we're talking about systemic change. That's systemic. So everybody has to be on board. And so the coach plays a critical role outside of individual schools in making that connection with people at the district level.
Well, and systemic change is a big, tall order, really. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think are some of the aspects of that are particularly challenging for coaches?
Well, teachers have a lot put on them, right? There's a lot of external factors that are really put on teachers. And sadly, sometimes they're told they're not doing a good job from various sources, the media, the public. And so it's easy for teachers to get discouraged. And so then a coach comes in, and the coach has to act as an encourager. And to recognize that if teachers are discouraged, it doesn't mean that they don't want to learn, they don't want to grow. It's just they're overwhelmed, quite simply. They're just overwhelmed. There's so much. And so it can be difficult for coaches because teachers sometimes are in this place where they're discouraged because of everything that's going on or the stresses that they feel on them. And so coaches have to be able to come along and not only encourage, but to be able to support the coach and to, again, value the teacher's voice, bring them into the decision-making process so that they feel valued and they feel a part of the change that's happening around them.
Do you have any specific strategies that you might recommend to a coach who's struggling in that particular area with being this positive influence?
I think one thing is coming at this with an attitude of a positive presupposition. So it's always assuming or presuming positive intentions in the other person. And so many times, because we're perhaps discouraged or dealing with maybe low test scores or something that's not, a great thing to talk about, we have a tendency when we see teachers that are discouraged to assume the worst. And so I talk a lot to coaches about this positive presupposition. We should always assume positive intentions on the part of the other person. And so even asking ourselves, what might be the positive intent of this action or this behavior? And then I think the second thing that goes right along with that is trying to understand where the teacher's coming from. It's that understanding piece, because we can sit back and assume what we think is going on, which usually isn't right. And so right along with assuming positive presuppositions is to get to understand, talk to the teacher, find out where they're coming from, find out what's going on, so that you can understand where they're coming from.
We've talked about coaches, let's talk about teachers. What do you think are some of the most challenging aspects of being coached for a teacher?
Well, I think it depends on trust. It's all about trust. If trust is there, it's not a difficult thing. If trust is not there, it can feel like evaluation. So coaches across the country, say, well, teachers don't want me to come in their room. Well, as soon as I hear that, I'm thinking to myself, it's a trust issue. They don't want you coming in their room because they think you're going to evaluate them. Because for years in education, when another adult came in your room, it was evaluation. And so now all of a sudden we have coaches coming along who aren't supposed to be evaluative, but yet that's the feel that the teacher gets, especially when there's not trust. When the trust is developed and everybody is on board about what the role is of the coach, then that tension is not there. And then it's a collaborative thing, and it's about you coming in and giving me feedback and helping me learn and grow, instead of you coming in and telling me what to do. So it's this difference between being a consultant and telling somebody what to do and being a coach and leading someone. And so I think the difficult part is when coaches come in and want to tell teachers what to do. Teachers aren't comfortable with that. They don't want to be told what to do. And so I think the telling piece is not a good strategy. I think coaching is a better strategy.
When you say coaching is a better strategy, do you have a structure that you recommend, that you think about?
I do. Cognitive coaching is a model that I'm very familiar with. I've actually looked at all of the models that are out there, and I happen to think this one's superior. Cognitive coaching treats coaching as a non-evaluative, non-judgmental stance. And so when I am in coaching mode, it's not evaluative, it's not consulting, it's not me telling you what to do, it's me supporting you to be more self-directed. And when I am in that role, non-judgmental, and that's difficult, but it's something that coaches need to work on because judgment gets in the way. When we go into a situation and we think we know what is right for this person, we may or may not know. And so it's really important to have trust and to be able to have a conversation with that person, to be able to figure out what they need. And in cognitive coaching, they actually talk about the fact that we all have the internal resources that we need to do what we need to do. And the coach's job is to help bring those resources to the forefront. So by questioning and through paraphrasing, I can analyze where cognitive coaching calls them states of mind. I can analyze your states of mind, and then I can help you raise your states of mind. So for example, one of the states of mind is efficacy. Another is flexibility. So if I recognize that you're low in flexibility from a conversation I'm having with you, then instead of telling you that and telling you to shape up, I can use questioning based around flexibility questions to help you think about that and to support you in recognizing that and moving forward on your own. So it's very much a model that focuses on people becoming self-directed so that eventually coaches would work themselves out of a job.
And it seems like the decision-making process would rest more so with the teacher than it is with the coach.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's about the teacher becoming self-directed and recognizing and making judgments on their own. So I don't make judgments as a coach, but what I do is I mediate your thinking through questioning so that you can make the decisions and changes that you need to make.
Are there any questions you might ask to either coaches or leaders of a coaching program to maybe push their thinking as they're thinking about implementation or ways to move forward?
Mm-hmm. I think one is, in what ways can we include teachers' voices? I think that's really critical, that we continue to ask ourselves, how can we value teachers' voices? How can we get teachers' voices on the table? I think that's critical. I think another question would be, especially if you're thinking about change, how might this change, whatever it is, connect to something in which we've engaged in the past? I think anytime we can make connections, it's helpful. So many times teachers feel like there's this thing and there's this thing and there's this thing and there's this thing. And anytime we can have a collective conversation about how is this connected to things we've done in the past, it will help teachers make those connections, which will also help them then make those connections with students. So I think those are two critical questions.
And two good ones as well. Thank you very much for being with us today.
And thank you.